Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Pancake Parlay, episode 105. I'm your host, The Don, and I'm here with Chatters. How are you today?
I'm good, Don. How are you?
I am good. I'm good. The Pancake Parlay podcast is a thing that we do every week where we talk about movies, TV shows, games, the whole shebang. So let's just kind of get into it. Obviously, it's hard to really start, I guess, podcasting at the current moment without knowing, I guess, modern stuff that's happening around the world and I guess modern context. Um, and basically, there's been a lot of protests, obviously, because of the death of George Floyd. And then that's actually spilling out on I guess modern entertainment as well.
Yeah, I think it's definitely something that's very hard to avoid because now people are kind of questioning um, the media that we watch and whether it's healthy or whether it's good or whether it's I guess uh, you know like how influential it can be in terms of our perspective of things. And that's the case. In America, everybody's obviously been protesting and stuff, and that's also leading to various changes, like you said, in the industry, like in real life, and then in the industry as well. One of the big ones that happened is the show Cops um, got cancelled after 31 seasons. And
Which is a bit. This is a long time. I remember even knowing about cops even when I was a little kid.
Yeah, I just kind of saw the show like randomly on TV. I never really watched it. Like like to me, like this isn't like the biggest loss for me, but I can definitely see why people, one, are kind of upset that it, um, like was around and therefore wanted it cancelled. But then I can also understand why people, are kind of upset that it got cancelled. Now the show has been going out, has been around, I think, for 31 seasons, and it was like originally on Fox, but then it like I think moved over to Spike TV, and then Spike TV rebranded as Paramount in 2018. So obviously like under the Paramount network, it was going to have its 33rd season, but now they're canceling it, and I think obviously it's kind of like obviously to the reaction to all the protesting and the deaths of George Floyd as well, because I guess the argument is that the show kind of I guess I don't know how to
Like
really
I wouldn't say like I guess it's one of those things like glorifies. I don't know if you
yeah
know, but it's but I don't
glorifying
know. It's like
cops and stuff.
reality TV. It's like I think we have one in Australia where it's not cops, but it's like
A
what is it?
highway patrol, is
Highway
that one?
patrol.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
just like people like speeding whatever in their cars, and it's like I don't think it really glorifies it, but like I don't know. I never watched
I
Cops or whatever it
well,
was.
yeah, I think the state of how I think that's the thing, right? I think Australian kind of law enforcement is a lot different to how law enforcement is in America. So I can definitely like I don't want to make comparisons because obviously yeah, things are different here than how it is in the States. But at the same time, it's like yeah, it's like how much of this is them just kind of like, oh, okay, maybe we shouldn't premiere another season of Cops, and maybe we'll just like hold off when like people kind of like chill out a little bit, like so to speak, like when they're not going to get like the social media backlash for it, right? Like
Hmm.
it might be just one of those cost benefit analysis decision where it's like, okay, maybe we'll just hold off this year. We've got a lot of other entertainment programming that will just play instead in the meantime, and then we'll bring it back like next year or the year after or something. I don't necessarily think that it's like the end of the show, but I definitely think that because and plus is like I think there are plenty of other kind of similar shows like Live PD. I know that's a thing, um, and yeah, like I think all those kind of shows are just kind of everybody's kind of like walking a little bit on like eggshells, so to speak, right now.
Yeah, I've even
And
heard crazy things of as well of like something like Brooklyn 99 to be canceled because it shows cops in a funny, nice light. And I
mm,
think that's like the other extreme end of this, where it's kind of like it's not reality TV, it's scripted. But since cops are shown in a nice way, it's like nah, we can't have that.
I mean,
But
from my understanding, is the people aren't like the cops on like Brooklyn Nine supposed to kind of be incompetent though? Like they're not incompetent per se, but it's kind of like they do things, and but it then also is given like a hilarious slant on how they do things. Isn't that like the kind of supposed to be the point? It's not supposed to be reality, but I think that's the reason why something maybe like 99 won't get I jumped on because it's like it's a comedy, it's a parody, it's not supposed to be reality. Whereas
Not
like
supposed to be taken seriously. Yeah.
yeah, but at the same time, but that being said, we do have something like Gone with the Wind, right? That's also been I think taken off HBO Max, and apparently it'll come back with like I guess like a warning, or like not a warning, but maybe like a preamble before the show comes on, about like how Gone with the Wind is like um I guess it's supposed to be like a historic uh, rendition of like the times back in America's history. But I thought, I look again as an outsider, um, I thought it's like supposed to kind of be a given, right? That yeah, like this isn't how society or American society is now. It's supposed to be how it was in the past, and I don't know. For me, it just kind of seems like it's kind of being a little bit too much about stuff. But again, I understand why companies aren't taking the risk of just kind of leaving it out there and potentially getting into like a huge like social media firestorm about whether or not like things in it should be put in X or Y way. Also, I haven't actually watched Gone with the Wind. I know it
I
might be.
have.
Yes, I know you have, but
Hmm.
I haven't. So like again, like my like I mean, I guess you can educate me about it. Like, is the show like does it depict like slavery as like a good thing in the show, or is it like a neutral thing? Like how are things portrayed in like the show, in the movie itself?
I don't think it portrays it in a good light nor a bad light. I think it's just one of those things where it just exists, but like I think it's one of those things that since it doesn't touch upon it,
Mm,
in and of itself is just like, what the hell? Why is there like because in the house they have a caretaker, and the
hmm.
caretaker is obviously
An
an
African American woman,
African
right?
American woman,
Yeah.
and essentially it's not really touched upon it. They essentially the I guess the people living in the house, they talk to her, and things like that, but it's never really said like, oh yeah, like it doesn't have a point to it, I guess, because like for example, if there is a film about I guess back in those times done in the past like 40-50 years, that's going to be something that they touch on. It's like even
Mhm.
like movies recently that came out in like 2013, like The Help. That's purely about like, okay, it's about like I guess like people not really being slaves, but it's kind of like being house cat
Caretakers, yeah.
takers and things like that. But it's obviously the whole thing of like, yeah, they having the point of being humanized. I guess in the movie, it's not really them of just like being humanized. It's just like there for kind of being almost like set dressing slash a semi character. So I
Mhm.
feel like in general, it's like it's not taking a stance on any of this stuff. It is what it is of
Yeah,
the
it is.
time.
It is. Yeah, it is a backdrop of how American society was at this particular time and place, which I believe is 1939. Just as an additional point, the maid that you referred to, played by Harriet McDaniel, she actually won a Academy Award for her performance in this movie, and was the first African American to win an Oscar. So again, like this is the kind of
And this was
I
like
guess.
this was pretty much, yeah, 80 years ago. It's like, and it's basically like, it's coming back to, because the whole thing with Gone with the Wind is that it did come out in what 1939, so it's still kind of a very divisive era. However, the
Hmm,
film is not set at that time. It's actually set in the 1800s. It's actually during yeah, so it's like set kind of like Civil War era, like almost, because there's actually a really amazing shot where I think it's Scarlet, she's just walking on the fields, and there's
mhm,
all these like dead bodies, there all these people dying,
mm.
because the whole point of Gone with the Wind is like there's a whole set piece of like America's going to shit kind of almost, and like people are changing, but also has this kind of romance story. And I think that's what generally most people know about the Gone with the Wind is just frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn, because
Mm,
the whole character, Clark Gable's character, is supposed to be like, he likes this woman, but she's trying too hard to get, and then at the end of the movie he's like, you know what, you're too spoiled, so I don't give a crap what you do, I'm leaving. And that's basically kind of the structure of the film, but there's all this extra stuff into it, I guess.
right, I get it. So yeah, like, and I mean,
Either way, like in general, like I think it's a good solid movie. Obviously, it's throughout all the years, it's survived. It's still the most highest grossing film of all time.
Yeah,
With
that
inflation.
yeah, that was going to be my next point. Like, it's one of the most successful films of all time. And yeah, like I again, like I guess I'm not against like this movie having like a preamble and stuff. I just think it's like, again, it's kind of um you know giving people like a false understanding of what society at now thinks about how things were back then. Like yeah, it's like it's not. It doesn't seem like a movie that like condones slavery. It's just slavery is something that exists in the world as it is. So yeah, I don't know. Like, let us know if you disagree, or maybe explain something.
Well, that's the thing.
Explain.
You can see more and more of that, I guess, in most recent times, where I think most people, they want to see even things that came out maybe 20 years ago. They're just like, actually, that's really offensive to modern standards. And I think that mostly happens to comedy, because comedy, the pure point
Mhm.
of comedy is to push the boundaries.
Yeah,
And
like
then
yeah,
yeah,
it's applying like it's applying modern day retroactively to things in the past, right? And yeah, like I think obviously, people who do bad things, obviously should be viewed in the lens of like the bad thing that they did. But I think at the same time, like you know, not everything isn't as cut and dry and black and white as they try to portray things to be. And unfortunately, like I guess my main concern is like I hope that doesn't mean that the film will get censored in some way, because again we've talked about it on the show about how certain movies are being like censored or changed. There was that like I think Back in the
Back to
Future
the
they got rid of
Future. Yeah.
they got rid of like that racy magazine, and we've seen it in the I think it's happened in The Simpsons. It happened in other movies. At the moment, they're trying to change things to make it be like less like sexualized or less X and Y, and they're changing like I mean, look again, like for example, like I think like Tifa in Final Fantasy, like she's like obviously like is wearing something completely impractical for fighting, but then they've obviously changed it to give her like thigh highs and stuff, which is like totally fine by me. But like obviously people are like, oh well, hey, they're changing like what the character looks like and blah blah blah. Like I think like having like a reimagining isn't a bad thing, like a modern upgrade, but it's like when you kind of put on like when you make the character look completely different, like that's when people are gonna like not like things. And we're gonna actually go into that a little later, the topic. But I guess like what I'm basically afraid of is like hopefully this doesn't lead to people being like, oh well, we need to cut out X and Y scenes because these scenes in the movie we think are problematic. Or it's weird because they usually say they're problematic, not that they're a problem. It's just that it's like
Someone could
to.
take offense to it, so instead of having maybe possibly people getting angry about it in the future, we're gonna somehow read people's minds and like take it out or like put context in there beforehand. I feel like that's very like it's a Minority Report, very much of like, instead of reading people's crimes, it's like reading like what could possibly be offensive, and then and that's always been my problem. I think
Look,
that's
look.
why to me personally, that's why I feel like media is kind of stagnated a little bit in most recent times when it comes to movies, just purely because they don't try to push the envelope, or they try to be so divisive, because they're just like, no,
Mhm.
people won't like it, and it has to be a
look
general audience thing. So it's like,
look some people yeah, it kind of Han shot first thing, right? Like they tried to change that. And then people are like, hey, what the fuck? Like that was kind of supposed to be the point of Han's character, that he isn't a good guy per se. He's kind of like a diamond in the rough kind of thing, and that's how he portrays his character. But and then they changed it to Greedo shooting first, but then they changed it. I think they've changed it back now to Han shooting first, or I don't know how things work under Disney,
I know
right?
there's so many cuts.
But yeah, like I just don't want the movie itself to be changed, or they have to change, like, because again it sets a really bad precedent for future movies, or even like as I often say, like in things like books, right? Like one of my favorite books is To Kill a Mockingbird, and that entire book is about an African American man who was falsely accused of rape of a woman, and the whole book is like about the trial and all that kind of stuff. And like if they they obviously refer to him using certain slurs, and if they were to change that, that obviously it doesn't obviously change the entire book, but it takes away the context of one, how it was back then, and two, how the author wrote the book, right? So you're silencing kind of history, but then you're also silencing people's creative projects too. And and that's the kind of thing that I don't want. I don't want things that have been in society a positive force for us understanding how the world is, or was rather, being changed just because certain people, or like certain minorities of people, like as in a really 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 small fragment of people get offended on the behalf of others, which I tend to see more than
Yeah,
people
I see
being
that more
actively.
than like the actual like group that it's maybe semi being offensive, being actually being offended. It's like
Mm.
and that's why actually I really care about, like, for example, like Tarantino. Like like I think he's gone under fire many times, but he just kind of gets away with it almost because I think he is in that general crowd of like, yeah, like let's all be equal and everything like that, but it's still reserved the right to say certain things because of
I think
context.
I think also I think the thing is like Tarantino is like an auteur, like um and also like I think he has like the industry power, so he can say whatever he wants and not really get fired per se, right? Like as opposed to
Even if he
maybe
gets fired from one
someone
studio, the other studio is like, nah,
who just
you're
go,
gonna bring money to us, so like we're
yeah,
not gonna
like
do.
he's yeah. So it's like I think if you are like an up and coming like actor or director, you maybe might not be able to get that kind of power when you say certain things, and that was the case for actually. Well, onto our next story, which is we had an actor from The Flash, Hartley Sawyer. He plays Ralph Dibny, who's like the elongated man. So the actor was fired from the show because he had like a variety of different tweets, all really edgy like jokes that he was saying. Like I think it's pretty clear that he wasn't being obvious, like honest with what. Again, I'm not going to peer through the. I'm
I
not
know,
going to.
but yeah, I think I know what you mean. It's like obviously it's no, there's no ill intent involved with these jokes. However,
Well,
like a lot of
yeah.
people read it because, like, honestly, if the whole
Well,
thing, yeah, and
that
it's
and I
like,
was well,
yeah,
no,
go ahead.
I was just gonna say like, well, I don't think necessarily it's ill intent, but I also don't want to like be
Yeah,
like the
we don't know, we
arbiter
don't
of
know.
I don't want to be the arbiter of yes, he did not mean offense by saying this, but like yeah,
But
he
then again,
obviously
because he kept them up, like almost like because I think canceling people has been
it's
around
so
for like years, right?
it's
Because
so
but
stupid in
because
my
my whole thing is
opinion.
like, who's
Yeah,
like
sorry,
combing
go.
through like famous people's tweets and then
People
finding it out.
who
So like
yeah,
if he like if he remembers it, like he would have been he would have deleted it, I guess. But it's like one of those things where he kept them up.
I think it's really stupid that well, okay, for one, I think it's really stupid that people are being like the whole concept of cancel culture in general is very stupid because I think it really sets a bad precedent in terms of uh what we consider like okay in society, because obviously like some people change, right? And I think that's supposed to be the point. Like we don't know like what the situation is with Hartley, but like yeah, he may have said some edgy stuff and maybe he's not like that anymore. Maybe he like grew up. Like I'm assuming that's the case. Like that he's obviously grown up, and he released like a statement and an apology and stuff like that. But obviously it doesn't matter. But like yeah, like but the thing that I find really stupid is I'm surprised that whoever's his like manager or something like didn't like tell him, hey, like you should get rid of any tweets that might get you in trouble on social media. Like that seems to be like what I would tell a client, or if I suddenly got famous, that would be one of the first things I would do is look through my social media. You can just do like a Facebook search and just like see if you've ever said some dumb shit before and
And
just
then
delete it. Like
someone starts a campaign. That's why, and I think
yeah,
people actually learnt about this cancel culture stuff because even that Lindsay Headland lady who's heading that all female Star Wars thing. Apparently, she deleted
okay. Yeah,
a
yeah,
lot
yeah.
of amount of tweets, and there's a lot of that
Yeah.
stuff going on where it's like as soon as someone gets hired for high value projects, like their tweets like
They're
disappear
delete.
slash
Yeah,
delete
yeah.
because it's like
Yeah.
clearly they're ahead of the game. They know what's up, and they delete it because they know like whatever
Correct.
they say, people
Because
are
I think,
gonna be controversy about it.
yeah, because I think Disney obviously, um, uh, probably the people who work there obviously know this, and so they're like, hey, if you're gonna work here, you have to delete all this horrible stuff you said about certain people, and you have to get rid of that because otherwise that's going to come and bite you in the butt. And obviously it would have, and that's why they've done it. Like I think it's the same with a lot of other, and I think they've like it's like some people have learned from it, some people haven't. I think like obviously I guess like Sawyer, for example, didn't like see this coming. But I think like obviously given the current climate in America, like nobody's really safe. So like he's obviously um, gone removed. We also had I think like Stephen Amell, who was the actor for Arrow, the main character. And yeah, like I think he's obviously been um, very like pro Black Lives Matter and all that. Like that's obviously like another movement that's kind of like reappeared in the wake of George Floyd's death. But like he was also kind of talking about like, oh, like not all, like one of my friends are cops and like he's not bad, and not all of the cops are like bad, and and obviously people kind of aren't okay with that. They're not okay with him making a statement that, well, not every single cop is like corrupt. And it's really funny, and so he's gotten obviously like um hit from social media about it, like saying that like, oh well, not all cops are bad, like like some do their job, like this guy that I know, he does his job, he's a good guy. And yeah, people obviously jumped on him on social media about it. But then we also had Kevin Conroy, um who I also recently found out is gay, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's also said the same thing, like all the looting and stuff that people are doing, that's not good. Like in the
This is not what
protesting.
Batman would like.
Well, yeah, I guess. Yes, the irony. Well, actually, it's not irony, isn't it? Is it? It's more like, well, it's kind of him being in character, right? Like, no, the voice. Yes, the voice actor of Batman also doesn't like the riots in America. But I think that's not like a very um like a hard or like a hot take, right? I think like most people, even in America, are like, hey, we want to do protests, and from my understanding, most of the protests have not resulted in incidents. It's just all the people who use the protests as like a mask to go and do like looting and rioting and stuff, right? So again, it's very strange, like when people want to jump on certain kind of bandwagons to just either cancel people or cancel actors or like to the point that which I think like my personal opinion is celebrities and you can't really trust celebrities, you can't really trust corporations, you can't really trust politicians in their take when it comes to political things, because in the end they're only really concerned about their bottom dollar. Like they're gonna obviously say the least offensive thing, and they're obviously going to say the thing that's going to give them the most benefit at the current time, right?
Yeah,
So they're going to say,
we've seen it even like with the virus, for example. There's just so many people that jump on the bandwagon just to be like semi-relevant of something that's like in the news, and it's like
yeah,
it's
yeah,
not going to be, it's not really genuine. Even just with the companies and things like that, when they're just like, yeah, we're all in this together. Like no
mm.
matter what statement it is, it's like there's always like a whole
Well,
thing where it's like, oh well, really? Like, do you really mean that? It's like clearly not.
well, I mean, you have like, for example, like Nike talking about like, hey, you got to come together and end racism and stuff. But then like they have factories in China where they have like the Uyghur Muslims. They're like a Chinese minority that are Muslims, who are basically slaves, like in factories making the shoes for it. I didn't see them kind of making any statements about that. You had like the big controversy about like Blizzard and Activision getting like what is it? Not finding, but like kicking the winners of the Hearthstone tournaments for being like pro Hong Kong and stuff. Like all these companies and all these people are usually very silent when it comes to human rights violations across the world. It's just when they can either make a dollar, or they can make like money, or they have to like look good for the presses, then they'll say all this stuff. But otherwise they can just keep silent about it. So personally, my kind of desire is, or not desire, but rather my preference is, most of these people should just like keep their opinions to themselves. Because I can't really trust it. Like all the people who actually really do care about, like, the death of George Floyd and stuff, they're out there protesting. They're out there like at least trying to make a contribution and not have it be filmed by like a CNN or your Fox News or whatever to get like a clickbait title or to get followers on Instagram and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it's like my preference is, again, it's a very slippery slope because I'm sure there are. Look, I think a lot of celebrities do want to, because I think it's one of those things where it's like they want to say something good, and oh, they can also do something positive for their brand, right? But it seems very insincere when that starts to become like come off more of a priority, that oh, I can exploit this man's death for my own kind of clout. So yeah,
Basically, it's not on.
well, yeah, for the most part. But yeah, like that's the kind of situation out there. I guess, let us know what you think about, I guess the effects of the current protests and the media, because I think, and this is the kind of thing, right? It was already happening in terms of all the stuff that was happening with coronavirus, right? Like a lot of production and movies and stuff were already kind of stopped. But now we're having all this stuff as well. So just like Hollywood and I guess like Tinseltown, all that's all being affected by the state of a plethora of different things at the moment. So yeah, like give it, like let us know what you think about it. But one just to kind of move on to another thing, you're a big fan of Bill and Ted, and they
Yes, I am.
released the trailer for the movie with good old Keanu as well in it. That's the only person I care about. I think I watched the movie, but I wasn't like in love with the movie. If that makes sense. What do you think about the movie? So it's called Bill and Ted Face the Music. It's their third movie, correct?
Yes. So the whole thing is like, yeah, the first movie is basically them being like, hey, you're gonna fail high school if you don't finish this history report. So they get a time machine, go back in time, and kind of like, yeah, get these historical figures back for their history presentation,
Presentation.
get an A+, and then yeah, the second one is like, oh yeah, they basically get killed and they're gonna escape hell, and there's all this other stuff going on. People don't really like that one as much, but I think it's kind of cool in that one, because they've got the best bit about the movie is the guy who plays actual death, and he has a really good comedic appeal to it. And then basically the whole point of it is they're supposed to start this band called Wild Stallions, that basically they're out a song that basically has world peace, and then everyone just, the world's better in society, they build a better, world about it because they write amazing music. And essentially this third film is basically, it's kind of one of those paradox things where you've heard that you're going to be doing great things in the future, but essentially it never comes to pass, where they're supposed to be writing this amazing song, but it doesn't happen, and they don't become the big rock stars that it was kind of like they were supposed to be. So that's why it's called Villain Ted Face the Music, is because it's like, hey, wait a second, like, we're actually supposed to be doing something. So in this one, it seems like obviously they're kind of failed musicians, and they're gonna go back and they're gonna go in the future to steal the song that they wrote, to get to, so they get the idea to write the song. Obviously, firstly, I'm actually quite surprised about this film, in the sense of like, this film basically comes out in like a month and a bit, and this is the first trailer we've seen. Usually, they send a trailer a little bit more earlier than that. But from what I've seen, it looks basically up my alley. It looks like a Bill and Ted film, which is like, I'm not expecting high art or amazing cinema, but I'm just expecting some funny jokes about these guys who are, like, who want to achieve something great but didn't get there, and going time traveling. From what I can see is that, obviously they jump into the future and they see like themselves in prison. I think that'd be kind of funny, and to see where they've kind of had that happened. But since they do have a time travel like machine with the time box, I would assume that, that a lot of crazy stuff can happen. So they can not only go into the future, but they can go into the past, to fix certain things. And it'd be really cool to see other things, because there's another thing, that's a complete mystery with this, is that obviously we have like a 1 second clip of it, and it's like, obviously they both have daughters. And I'm just wondering where that comes into play. Like, are they going to be there writing the music with them, or is there going to be a whole plot of if they go forward in time and then they go back in time, they'll screw up the timeline, and then one of their daughters isn't born. Maybe that's one of the things. And then I'm thinking like all these ideas of maybe like they go back in time and then like maybe they'll have like a de-aging technique on some of the characters. It'd be really cool to have that as well. But yeah, I don't know. There's still a lot of things up in the air with this film. But from what I've seen, it just looks, yeah, more like Bill and Ted, which is basically what you want. And I did find out that the director of this film is the same guy who did Galaxy Quest back in like 2000, 2001. And that's a really, really funny film. And I hope he basically brings the same style to this film as well. And also, as far as I can tell, Keanu's still pretty funny if he wants to be funny. He doesn't always have to be a serious action guy.
Exactly. Again, like he's kind of come back into the like mainstream limelight. We're going to be seeing him a lot more with in Cyberpunk as well. Which, by the way, I just want to make an additional aside because I didn't actually put this in on our list to talk about. But apparently, Cyberpunk is being delayed for Google Stadia, which is
Okay, then.
yeah. I mean, look, the state of Stadia, right? Like, just as an offside, like the whole platform is kind of failed, don't you think?
Well, the whole thing is it's not really a platform because it's like it doesn't have its own thing, but still, it's like I kind of get it. Like, I feel like it's really much a second thought, and I feel like at some point that like within this year or next year they're gonna be like, oh yeah, like we're gonna shut it down. But I think Google knows that gaming is really big, and it's a big industry to get into, and you can make a lot of money. So I think they're gonna try to stick for half the course and really try to like I don't know, maybe they'll get someone to be like, okay, you can only stream this game this way, or like, and that will make people more hate them than if anything. So I think like they're in a rock and a hard place. I feel like they need to they just need to work on the technology more because as we've talked about before, I think next gen onwards, there's going to be a lot of different stuff of like, yeah, you can stream like next generation games on your phone
Mm-hmm.
as long as you have a good internet connection. So there's going to be a lot of that moving on. So I think they're going to still path the course and see where they go if they can compete, I guess.
I think, yeah, I think the problem is, there are other competitive things. Like I think it's called like I think it's Razer. They have like their own kind of streaming platform too. Also, like Xbox is coming out with like their I think it's like xCloud as well. Apparently, that's pretty good to play video games like off like the cloud network. And yeah, like I don't know, I think Google's really falling behind, and this is just like another stain on them. Like that, oh yeah, Cyberpunk is also getting delayed. So that which means essentially that the developers aren't making it a priority for them to release on their platform.
Yeah,
That's what
because
it
because we
essentially
don't even know
means.
the numbers of how many people have actually played it / adopted it, as far as I know. But like I'm assuming if it's a low priority, then clearly there isn't that many people who are interested in it.
Well, exactly. Well, yeah, I think it basically comes down to, is it worth fixing our game for this platform where there's going to be like two people playing it? It's probably a no. So yeah, it's kind of ridiculous. Again, like I think Google again shot themselves in the foot in that regards. But I guess to go on to our actual news story. So Netflix has been, well, they're going to be adapting Cowboy Bebop, but it won't be a one-to-one adaptation of the anime per se. So like the creator recently mentioned that, and then to quote him, "We ain't playing Bebop. Bebop is playing us. You can't look at Cowboy Bebop and say, well, it's just a takeoff point. We're going to give them different hair and different clothing, and we're going to be calling it something different. It's just sort of going to be a loose thing. If you're going to do Cowboy Bebop, you're going to be doing Cowboy Bebop. It's kind of like Star Wars. So that's obviously like a good point. They're trying to say like, oh well, it's not going to be exactly the same because and I think that's the kind of problem when you do adaptations of anime sometimes, right? Like it's hard to do like the special effects, for example, in an anime might look way better because it's all hand drawn and you're not having like several like CGI people having to put in all the effects, and it looks more like quote unquote not realistic per se, but it looks more dramatic because it is in the cartoon format. Um, but
Yeah,
essentially,
because like what you want with animated stuff is like to be because in the thing of animation is like you can over exaggerate things to make it cartoony, or how people move as well is to make it
Yeah.
cartoony, or you can do a lot of things, I guess, with animation. That's the whole amazing part of it.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, one of the other things he says here is, yeah, you got a show where you have 26 episodes full of color, and stuff. And he says here, we're not going to go one to one for with all those stories because we're also trying to tell a broader story of Spike and the Syndicate, Spike and Julia, Spike and Vicious, and all that. So in my opinion, what that kind of sounds like is, well, we're not going to do an adaptation of 26 episodes. This is Netflix. We're going to be doing a 10-episode show, and we're going to try and stretch it out for as many seasons as we want. So they're not going to, and also because of how it is in anime, it's not going to look as flashy. That's what I take out of it, because
Mm-hmm.
that seems to be the case when they do anime live action animations of things. Obviously, well, you like the Death Note Netflix show. I
Yeah,
didn't.
but the thing is with the okay, the thing with the Death Note thing is it is relatively grounded. Like even the animation and the way the characters look in their design, it is very much like it's still like it looks like almost like human, normal. Like there's no, it doesn't have people with crazy hair really.
Sure, but then the story is completely
Yeah,
different.
but
Yeah.
the story is completely different. But what I'm saying is like the anime of Death Note is relatively grounded. It doesn't have
Oh
the
yes, the show is
yeah,
grounded.
because they aside from like a certain like other characters that look really wacky, they
Look,
don't have they don't look anime esque. And I think that's why I'm very defensive with the Cowboy Bebop one, because it is very it's still human and grounded in such a way, but it still has these elements. For example, the
I think
thumbnail is Faye, like that is
yeah.
not a human representation of a person. Not only is it the body and the way the body looks, but on top of that, of like even just the hair color of purple is not a thing.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the thing. That's actually one of the things that they go into later. Like he says, like one of the small changes that we're making is that Faye's revealing costume has been toned down, because we need to have a real human being wearing that. I don't know how. You see, I kind of hate that. Like, I get that, like, the Faye's character, and look, let's face it, a lot of anime female characters wear like pretty revealing clothes, but at the same time, like, there are women who have this body type. It's just the actor or actress that you're gonna have in these shows aren't gonna. You're not gonna have like like Spike's freaking tall in the show, isn't he? He's like
Yeah, he's got
um,
long legs.
yeah, yeah. Dude looks like at least. And then you also have
And then you got
he's
what John Cho or whatever, and I'm assuming he's not that tall, but still.
yeah, exactly. Well, or they're gonna use the Google film camera, like techniques to make him look taller, right? Like that's obvious. Like a lot of
Mm.
low angle shots, or have him
He'll
step
look
on
menacing.
something.
But even with Spike, it's like my whole worry is,
Mm,
and especially with anime adaptations, with live action, is the hair. Like Spike,
mm,
like the hair. I think hair is very important more than a lot of things, and it's like hair is like, like what is he gonna do with Spike's hair? From my knowledge, because I remember like earlier this year, the film Grudge came out, and I think he did an
mm,
interview with like IGN and things like that. And I looked at his hair at that point, because at that point they were filming.
mm,
And it kind of looks like this kind of like very messy. It looks I'm assuming that's his Spike hair. Obviously, it can't be like exactly 1 to 1, because that makes literally no sense. But I think like
mhm.
it almost kind of like it's kind of like, yeah, this kind of crazy hair, and it's like it could work, but
Well,
yeah.
yeah, I think that's the problem when you have, like, again, when you try and do like a one adaptation, like you know. A lot of studios, they'll sometimes we're lucky and we get someone like a Henry Cavill, right, who's just like the guy basically looks like Superman. He's got like the physique of Superman, and in my opinion, I think he actually does a pretty, like, when they kind of, obviously the Justice League version of Superman is very different to, like, I guess Snyder's cut of Justice League that's going to be coming out, but like I kind of like the more kind of hopeful Superman that they had in it, and it kind of just shows that, like, yeah, when given a direction, Cavill does a really good job. Like, I mean, I've liked all the movies that Henry Cavill's been in. So again, I think it's very hard when you to find like those three things, like like an actor who looks like a character, who can act the character, There's probably a third one that I'm probably forgetting, but yeah, it's like it's kind of hard to find because there are like a lot of like especially the Asian hairstyles which are just like really big and puffy and like maybe kind of spiky. Like I've seen it. Like the people like that exist, but are they good actors? Right? Like it's like you have to choose one. It's like there's a lot of really good characters. There's a lot of good cosplayers who can look like a character from an anime or a superhero film, but can they do the acting that's necessary to make you believe that they're the character? Probably not. Right?
Yeah, and
And I
I
think
think
that's
that yeah, that's definitely another problem as well.
well,
Uh,
but my problem is that for all these anime adaptations of things, they usually fail at doing the adaptation, as in getting like a good actor to adapt the anime, and then also the actor doesn't look like the character from the anime either. So it's just like Cowboy
it's
Bebop
like
or the anime in
It's that
name.
Dragon Ball Ultimate movie or whatever it was.
Yeah, I mean, and then the okay, so and the other comparison would be like how you had Ghost in the Shell, right?
Mhm.
Like a lot of people, obviously there was like some controversy then about Scarlett Johansson not being Asian and therefore like even though I think they even said that like what is it the major like her character like isn't actually necessarily supposed to be Japanese. She has a Japanese name, and in the kind of future, it's like she's swapped bodies before, so anyway, even besides all that, it's like yeah, I heard like the movie looked like the anime at a lot of points, but then like the story slightly different, and then like Johansson's like acting wasn't like that great in it. So you see
Yeah,
like and that basically like made the film kind of fail and didn't get like the hurrahs that it kind of wanted. But then you compare it to something like what's that movie that came out last year that we really liked?
the
Alita Battle
Bleach one.
Angel. No, Alita Battle Angel,
Oh yeah,
right?
Alita.
Like,
Yeah,
yeah, Alita Battle Angel. Like, obviously, the main character, like, she obviously looks more like an anime character because it's like all CG and stuff. But then all the characters that aren't CG, they kind of look like their anime equivalent. That's probably got to be like one of the better anime adapted
I think it pretty much
movies.
is. Like Alita is like it's just really well done, and it's obviously taken by care of people who like the world, like the characters.
Mhm.
And I think that's the worry between like for example, like the Cowboy Bebop, um, and how much money does Netflix have, to make
Mhm.
it such a believable world?
Not
Because like,
not
cause,
enough.
yeah,
Not
because
enough.
my whole thing with Alita Battle Angel is like obviously a movie they have a hell of a lot more of a budget, but like obviously Cowboy Bebop is kind of set in the futuristic space. It's not too futuristic where it's kind of out there, but it's in
Hmm.
such a way where it's like it's kind of like run down. They're set in other futuristic things. It needs to have that dystopian esque type of feel to it, like where there's like a lot of clutter everywhere, and there's just a
Hmm.
lot of detail in the background and how people live. I think that's
Yeah.
why I actually commend the Ghost in the Shell live action movie, is because yeah, the setting and how they made everything look, it was pretty much like a
One,
good.
two. Yeah.
It's pretty good. So my hope is like I'm hoping with this adaptation they at least have like the style, like it looks like a place to be
Mm.
lived in,
I think you're
and
asking
that's
too
what you want.
much.
Yeah,
I think
it's
you're
like it's
asking for
even
too
just something
much.
like a Blade Runner thing. Just give me a dense
No.
world. That's what I want. Firstly, um,
I guess they could kind of do that because at least because they could basically reuse some of the assets that they had for Altered Carbon, right?
Yeah, yeah, they could. That's my only hope, and I think the other thing, as you mentioned before, is like they're doing their own adaptation, and their own story. Now, a lot of the times, I don't like that in a sense of like I don't want them to obviously copy one to one. Like I don't really
Mm.
care if they do or don't. But obviously they're keeping certain structures of stuff. But the problem
You
is,
see,
I
yeah,
don't trust the people who write scripts. Like I got to know who's writing these and what their history is, because the whole thing is, do they know the characters so well that they can write extra material for them
no,
that it's true
no,
to
they
the
cannot.
character? That's the
No,
real
they cannot.
that's the problem, is that you're gonna write something where it's like this character would not do that, and this is not my character, and that's what make people hate things, is because they create these things that don't exist,
Well,
just to put it in their own way, and it just kind
well,
of
yeah,
ruins it.
as in well, yeah, I kind of see it as well. There's source material and they're going outside of the scope of the source material, and it creates something that's bad. We'll probably go into it a little bit about our review for 13 Reasons Why. But yeah, like when you kind of go off script, these kind of quote unquote writers generally do like a really bad job. I'm much rather a one-to-one adaptation of shows and movies based on their source materials, because generally people who are in order for a book to be considered good enough to adapt into a movie, by default it generally, by virtue, it means that it has good structure, like it's got like a good pacing, it's got good characters, it's got X and Y, so you don't really need to like shove in anything in order to make it work. It's just like, okay, we're gonna adapt it like this, and that's enough. That's why you can generally trust source materials, because they're good enough to become movies, or worthy enough to become get greenlit to be a movie in the first place. But and you can see that with something like Game of Thrones, right? Like Game of Thrones, like what seasons 1 through, was it 6 or is it
Yeah,
5?
it's pretty much, yeah, 1 through 6. So that, yeah,
Yeah,
that followed
we're based off.
the books. They did cut out a lot of things, but still it still had the general structure, and
Yeah.
it was really well done. But obviously, since they didn't have that structure of something to follow back on, that's where the problem started. And it's like
Yes.
I've come back to kind of your idea of, yeah, like having the idea of an intent of the characters and where they go. It's like the reason why you're adapting Cowboy Bebop or making into a live action is because you like the characters, you like the story, um,
Mhm.
and that's the thing. Like,
Well,
or even then, what I think they might do, is have a mix. So it's like, oh yeah, this story beat slash this story idea that's from one of the episodes of Cowboy Bebop,
yeah, yeah,
and
it's
then
gonna
other and
combine.
then the others kind of original, and it'd be really interesting to see which one's original, which ones aren't, and what how people perceive them. And I think that's what, but that's the thing. It instead of a show being great, it becomes good because
No, I think
some episodes are hit and miss.
mediocre. I think it's gonna be mediocre. I think that's the problem, right? And I think we've said this. I've said this before, that like the same thing with Star Wars, right? When Disney got the property of Star Wars, making a mediocre Star Wars film isn't a good thing, because Star Wars has a lot of like rich lore and ideas that George Lucas has created, along with other writers and authors throughout the many years that it's been around for. And making an a below average, mediocre Star Wars film is a bad thing, because you know you have the ability to make something great, but you didn't. And I think that's the same thing when you kind of make Game of Thrones and you kind of half-ass the ending. People see it as the representation of everything. Like, sure, people still like Game of Thrones, but people now, when they think about Game of Thrones or when they talk about Game of Thrones, they talk about how bad it is. Not necessarily about, oh yeah, I like that one scene and stuff. Like, yeah, people can agree with people like liking X or Y episodes, but now the whole thing is kind of destroyed because they just couldn't land land the show properly. And the thing with Cowboy Bebop that you were saying, like, yeah, people they were drawn to adapting this show because obviously it's got a good story and stuff, but I think that's giving a lot of these creative types way too much um uh you know agency in their control of it. I think it's more like, oh well, the Netflix AI, or their kind of what they use to pass all their data that they have from users, is, hey, users like Cowboy Bebop, and people have been asking for a Cowboy Bebop live action adaptation. Why don't we do it? Because there's already a pre-installed fan base and user base that will by default watch this show, right?
Hmm.
That's how I think Netflix does its kind of planning. Is they look at what people want to watch, and they'll try and adapt it based on interests that already exist, rather than trying to make necessarily something wholly original. A lot of these things that come out on Netflix are like derived in some capacity, like I was saying before about House of Cards, like that was literally created based on people's love of David Spacey, and that also crossing with people who liked the British House of Cards, and then they made the show, right?
Hmm.
I think it's the same thing with this. They're like, okay, well, people like Cowboy Bebop. That okay, we've got like thousands of people who will now either come to Netflix or will justify keeping their Netflix subscription, and that's what they want. They want people to continue subscribing to Netflix, and so they'll do it by making things that they think people who are already watching will want to watch. That's
Hmm.
the that's the way it is. It
That's
seems
the
to
way
be.
they make content these days.
Uh,
But yeah,
yeah, go.
and I guess like to kind of wrap it all up, my whole thing is like I still like I need to know like who's involved with this in a sense of like writing wise and directing wise, because like obviously from what I know is that they've got the Watanabe, Shiro Watanabe, the the main writer and director of the Cowboy Bebop TV show, and Samurai Champloo and all that. He's a creative consultant, which generally these days doesn't really mean anything, because obviously we've seen that a lot of times with different types of media, and they kind of shove off aside whatever they say sometimes they don't really have any final say on it. So far the only person that I know who's working out behind the scenes that's actually really good is Yoko. And she did the original music for the TV show, so I'm assuming
Mhm.
um it's going to be amazing music. But I still want to know who's the writer, who's the directors, and like I want to know what their story is all about, because
That's true.
that's the real key. Is like, okay, you've got all this supplementary stuff so far. They've already been filming, but I want to know who the writer is, because like we had this with like The Witcher, for example, where they're just like, oh, the this lady is the writer and like showrunner of the Witcher show, and then really it's got to like, okay, what's the history behind this person,
Uh,
and what the whole thing. I
no,
don't know
that's a good point.
anyone. There's no stamp to anyone attached to this, so that's why I'm a little
Yeah,
bit
yeah.
worried.
No, I think that's fair enough. Like again, like we always say, like, oh, I don't have a positive. I have quite a glass half full perspective when it comes to Hollywood and their ilk creating things based on material, because they seem to be doing a really bad job these days about it. But yeah, ultimately we'll just have to wait and see when there's more information about it. Maybe there might be a cool trailer, and maybe it might be the coolest Cowboy Bebop in the world. Although it gives me good motivation to go back and watch Cowboy Bebop.
Yeah, but
And yeah, so maybe
it's
I'll
so
do.
good. It's so good.
It
Like
is good.
my favorite anime. It's so good. Like my favorite episode is the one where there's the cowboy that looks exactly like Spike, but he's not Spike. And then they have like a little
Mm-hmm.
duel. Like to me, like yeah, it's got like fun moments where it's like, because even if you think about it as a series wise, there's like probably about maybe six or like eight episodes that are related to like the main story. The rest is kind of all like one off like episodes,
Yeah, yeah.
but each one reveals I guess a feeling or a thing about the characters that they're in the cast.
Mm-hmm.
So you get character moments with them, but like I guess the main through line of
Well,
Spike is it really is that like six episodes. Um,
good shows kind of mix in plot and I guess like the overarching plot, while also giving us like key character moments that make us like understand and learn more about the characters as a whole. And
mhm.
I think obviously Cowboy Bebop does a good job at that, including the movie. The movie's really good too. Um, all right, and I
And
guess
then yeah,
yeah.
basically another show that does that really well is basically Doom Patrol. We got like a season 2 trailer of Doom Patrol.
Hmm.
And I think it just looks more wackier and more crazier and most like very like absurd than it was last season, but I'm all for it. I feel like a lot of people, if you watch Doom Patrol, you know what you're getting into, and this
Hmm.
just seems more of it basically.
Yeah, I think with me, I felt like a lot of, and this is the problem. What I enough, I think will be like a problem, which is a problem with a lot of these shows that are on streaming services. There's a lot of like filler, so to speak, right? And I think my problem, like thinking back on Doom Patrol season one, is there was a lot of filler leading up to them kind of actually going and having the fight, or like trying to do something to try and find the professor. Like there'd be some episodes where they're like, "Oh, we need to go find him," and then other episodes where they're just like contextually just clowning around. Which doesn't mean like the episodes are necessarily bad, like but it just means like it kind of ruins the pacing of the show. I felt like the show had a lot of pacing issues, whereas this season seems to be like, and it was all supposed to like set them up to be quote unquote superheroes, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
or them like, they're having, oh no, we're not superheroes, oh we're not a team, we're not all that. But like now that they're all a team, season two is set up to be like, okay, they're going to actually do things in a team setting, and it's going to actually get to the point of whatever they're trying to explore, which obviously is the doctor's daughter, um, and the doctor's like kind of the professor's history with them, and that, oh hey, maybe he used them for experiments and stuff. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what this. Again, I think because the plot they've kind of pushed past, sorry, this whole growing pains about, are we a team, aren't we, now that that's like
Out of the way,
has
like
out of
that's
the
always
way.
great. That's
Now it's
pretty much a lot of growing pains for a lot of that stuff. Is like we get to that point where it's like now they're finally a team and now they get to do it. It's
yeah.
even funny because even I think like in the last episode or second last episode of that season, obviously the I think his name's Negative Man. I think I forgot the main guy's name, the villain's name, where he's like
Hmm.
like it has that fourth wall break where it's kind of like, yeah, well, what's the show called, the Doom Patrol? I didn't even get to see them as a team. So I
Mm.
think that they're very much self-aware, and I think that's why I kind of like this show. It's very quirky, very offbeat, and it is very different. I always like that kind of stuff, especially because like for comic book stuff, we've seen a lot of like fighting crime and things like that. It's really good to see a different set of characters with different set of skills, but also it's a different medium altogether, and I feel like it's very interesting to see. So that's why I'm excited to see Doom Patrol. Interesting enough, it's also getting premiered into HBO Max as well. But
As opposed to
the DC
the
streaming
DC
service.
universe, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
which is interesting because again, it is very strange, and I think a lot of people who use the DC app, like HBO app, are very confused. Like, oh, why why am I getting this show? Why am I getting this show? So, oh, that's on a different app. But like it is kind of confusing. I think they'll have to roll everything into one eventually. It'll just have to take time. Um, yeah, just I guess some of the rumors. I guess it's just like I guess the rumor section. We'll
Is
answer
the
each of
rumor
the
mill?
yeah, we'll just blast through them pretty quickly. But like one of the first ones is there was a rumor about like, oh, like Kate Kane is gonna die in season 2 of Batwoman, but apparently that the I think the creators came out and said no, that's not the case. She'll just go missing, and season 2 is basically going to be about um why Kate Kane went missing, which is already kind of like a bit of a mindfuck, since like the season 1 of, I guess, Batwoman was supposed to at least in part be about trying to find out why Bruce Wayne went missing, but they just kind of went in a completely different direction in the season. Again, I don't recommend people watching Batwoman. It's probably the worst show. The DC, uh, I guess, Arrowverse kind of CW shows have come out. Like it's probably the worst one. Um, but obviously, because I don't know, I just hate myself. I
It's like
don't
I'm
watch
just
this
gonna
show.
keep on watching it.
I can watch it. Just see the clown fiesta that the show is. But yeah, like it's such a mistake that they're replacing sorry, that they're not only replacing the main actor, but they're replacing it with an original character. Again, this is the problem that I have with when you give um uh, quote unquote writers free range over a original character in a universe they typically have no idea about. They usually is like it's like you see it all the time on these CW shows where, oh, you have Ra's al Ghul, who's like the leader of the like a secret
Assassins.
ninja assassins, and you're having somebody who's like literally off the street going toe to toe with an assassin that's been killing and training all his life under Ra's al Ghul. Like it's just so stupid, and it really breaks the universe sometimes. Like sometimes you can kind of be like, okay, yeah, they had some training under the main hero. Just always like shits me that it's something that's always overlooked. It should just be like a night and day comparison, a show and don't show rather than tell kind of thing. But
Mm.
yeah, or like you show it like, oh, they're able to be the character by using their brain or something, something. Oh,
Something
they
they didn't expect,
underestimated
rather
you.
than just like raw power fighting on their terms type of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't contextually from a writing perspective make a lot of sense. So with Kate Kane, like she's ex-military, she's also was away training much like Bruce Wayne. So when she came into the role as Batwoman, like nobody questions her ability because again, they showed it already that she's well trained. But whoever this new character that they're going to bring in, they'll probably have to do the same thing. But it's like, oh, now there's another Batwoman, and is she going to wear the costume? Is the costume different? Is it going to have like, yeah, just
Like,
those kind of
and I
things are
think
so
that's
dumb.
that's the problem. It's so much of a big writer's like question mark. It's like okay, how much of this is going to be the exact same? You're going to be like, is it going to be like a mantle thing where like someone's like, oh well, like the gadget person is going to
Well,
be like, oh well,
they
they
already
used,
have
yeah, I
that.
know, but they're going to be like, oh well, the girl before you, she left, but she wanted you to have it, or like
Have
you
this,
found it or
yeah.
something. Like there's going to be like random workarounds to be like, okay, let's
Um,
just have this thing that we're going to set up and then forget about everything else and just be like, yeah, that's it. Like that's the
DC needs
easiest way to explain it, but yeah.
DC needs to cancel the CW universe. That's my opinion. That's my hot take. They need to
Well, that's
cancel
the
it
thing.
all.
It's kind of done its course. Like,
Yeah.
it started, back in 2011 with like Arrow, and that's pretty much nearly 10 years ago. Flash, pretty much it was a really good spin off of it. I'd say Flash in and of itself, mind the pun, has run its course. Legends of
Mm,
Tomorrow seems
for
to
the
pretty
most part.
much been relatively running its course as well.
Yeah, it has.
And yeah, and then I don't really watch Supergirl or Black Lightning,
That is
but pretty much
different. Yeah.
pretty much all these shows need to kind of be done condensed. We've done the the biggest crossover that we can possibly have at this point. Like after
Hmm.
this, there's really, as far as I know, that they don't have anything planned for other crossovers. So it's kind of like it's almost done. Like it was done with that.
I think they're having like small crossovers, like having like, oh, we're gonna have this character in this episode or something. They'll do stuff like that, but it's not going to be as big as they were in the past. And yeah, you're right. Like I think the only like the best show out of the lot that remains is The Flash, and I think that's only because again they've had their it's also the second longest running CW DC's superhero show as well. So they've had, and I think it's probably had the like more like interesting storylines in it. Whereas like for example, like Legends of Tomorrow, it's fun, but it's not something that you really go into thinking, oh, well, this is going to be a character defining show. It's more like, hey, Legends of Tomorrow kind of reminds me of like when you have like toys, but they're from different like like you got like a
From
Star
different
Wars toy, and you got
sets.
yeah. So you got like a Star Wars toy, and you have like a Pokemon toy or something like that, and you're like, all right, we're just gonna put I'm gonna just play with a bunch of these together and make my own shit up. When I was a kid, it doesn't have to make sense, but it's just fun because you're just like making shit up as you go. That's literally Legends of Tomorrow. It's not something that you really take too seriously. It's like kind of like, oh, we have all these leftover characters that aren't really being used in the TV shows that they originally come from, but let's just use them for some kind of random thing that we have prepared. But yeah, that's the situation with Batwoman. I don't think it's gonna be a shit show to say the least. Apparently, there's a rumor of Joker being in the new Batman movie that's coming up in Chris Terrier's Batman,
Which I
which is
kind of don't
interesting.
want because like we've
But I think
seen
it's just going to be like a
we've
reference.
yeah
I think it's just going to be a reference, like as in like, kind of like what they did for like the Dark Knight movie, how they had like the Joker's card and like, ooh, there's a guy calling himself the Joker, and like, it's going to be it's probably going to be something like that. I don't think he's going to actually be in the film.
yeah, because they already what have Penguin and yeah, they already knew they had Penguin, and I think there's another villain they announced.
I think.
So
Oh, did they, is it Riddler? I think it's
yeah,
Riddler.
yeah, Riddler, yeah. So you already got it stacked, and then you've also got Catwoman. So then you've got a lot of that stuff going on. Like I feel
Hmm.
like it's already got like you could say you can keep on going with more characters because the Dark Knight, I would say, kind of dismantled the myth of you can't have like more than one villain, but still, like
Hmm.
I feel like the Joker in and of itself is like a whole thing.
Well, I think. Oh, what? Wait, which Batman movie? I think it was like Batman Forever, where they had like Riddler and Two Face in it, and
Yes.
they also had, but yeah, I think most of the films actually had two villains, right? For the most part.
Yeah,
Is that the one
yeah.
with
I think so. That was like late.
Penguin?
Yeah, there was
Well, I was
Penguin.
gonna
There was
say
Penguin slash
Penguin and
Selena Kyle.
yeah, I guess if you count Catwoman as like a bad guy, in that which I guess yeah, you technically can. Again, my memory of that film is so. I'd need to watch those films again, actually. I had like Poison Ivy, Bane, and what is it, Mister Freeze in what is it, the other Batman movie, Batman and Robin. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think they've had much just like again, those are like really campy movies. I think it's like if they have something that's kind of like a long Halloween kind of movie, that'd be pretty cool if they do like a setup for that. Maybe they could even because there was also rumors of there being like a Bane movie and stuff. But again, I don't want to pay any of these rumors much credence until we hear like a lot more solid evidence coming out. Because like another rumor is that apparently Quicksilver is going to be in one division, but not the Quicksilver you might think. Evan Peters, who's Quicksilver from the X-Men movies, is apparently cast in the Disney Plus show. Now, I wonder if that's because we have like Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, like that's supposed to have Wanda Maximoff in it as well, because obviously it's like supposed to explore like going to different multiverses and seeing different versions of different people and different things like that movie I'm actually pretty interested in watching because again that's like one big component that DC usually does really well, which is alternate versions of characters and love that are like either twisted in a little way or kind of given a different like flair or something. So I'm not sure if whether like and because like Wanda's powers are usually originates from like this almost like like magic, so that you can like make people and create things like with their mind and will it into existence. That's kind of like a little bit of it's a very simplified version of it. That's kind of how they are portrayed in the comics. So it'd be interesting if like, oh, is this supposed to be like her meeting an alternate version of her brother, or is this supposed to be like, oh well, this is my brother now because we want to kind of converge the universes together or bridge them together. And
I think if anything, it's just gonna be a throwaway. Maybe like as far as I
mm,
know, like
it makes the most sense
yeah,
for
yeah,
it to be
and
that.
and I feel like DC is probably as you mentioned really good with that stuff, and they give credence to it like more, having a multiverse. Um, so maybe that's why I am interested in Doctor Strange and all this stuff as well, where it's like will like because Marvel has never referenced like the Fox movies. Um, so it would be very interesting if like since they do have the rights for it now to be just like okay, we're gonna have a quick like moment of Quicksilver for like half a second to be like fan service kind of almost because yeah, and I think that's the easiest way to go because the real question as well because on top of that is if they do reference it and there's probably only one other character to get away with it and we've talked about it is Deadpool. That's a Fox
Mm-hmm.
thing. It's already in that universe. So at some point whenever they do that Deadpool movie, if it's even happening or not, they're going to be like referencing like to that point of being like hey,
That's
we're
true.
in the same universe and it's like yeah what and then it takes different elements of like okay certain characters are dead or alive, cast differently in certain universes so you can have like the Quicksilver that you want but also have the new X-Men team that you want, so
Mm.
it's very much open to whatever
Also,
they can do.
just as an additional aside, this is just I guess because this is just casting Evan Peters in it, it's not actually confirming that he is playing the Quicksilver role. He could just be playing like he could be like a new villain or a new character or something. Could be.
Yeah, it
So
doesn't always
we
have to
don't.
be Quicksilver.
But I think it is a bit of a missed opportunity if they don't reference the Quicksilver thing. But yeah, that's the situation there. And just as a last bit of news, so Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse sequel is in production, and apparently it's going to be coming out in 2022, so next year, which is pretty cool because I really like the first one. So if
Yeah, I
it's
think I
more,
think I think it really pretty much came out of nowhere, and everyone's like, "Wait a second, this is actually like really good, like really
yeah,
really good."
like yeah, if not like Spider-Man, like
Also, it had Nicolas Cage in the
watch
film.
the old Spider-Man, all the old. Well, it's definitely better than Amazing Spider-Man 1.
Yeah,
Okay,
remember those
so
those movies?
mm, unfortunately, but yeah, I look forward to a sequel. But yeah, and speaking of sequels, I guess we'll go into our review of a show that we've been kind of tangentially following over the past couple of years, which is 13 Reasons Why. Now don't kind of drama shows, but I think because I actually these it kind of made me more obliged to keep following this as a whole, even though ever lived up to the high of the first season. But I guess just to give like kind of a summary of 13 Reasons Why, if you've never watched it before, the show's about the suicide of a girl called Hannah Baker, and her releasing a bunch of tapes in order to kind of